The fans are out to get a ticket or two from Walla Walla, Washington to California.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to tonight's edition of Inside Pitch with me, Joe Mansolino, and my co-host slash producer, Mr. Brian Lehman.
Hello.
Brian, how are you today?
Man, if I got any better, they wouldn't let me show up ever again.
There you go. There you go.
That's one of those Joes now going, what?
No, I understand. I understand what that means.
That's because, see, if you come from the land of sports, you realize, it's all how we view things, right?
That's right. Absolutely. That is how it goes.
So, how has our week since our last meeting been?
Pretty good. Pretty good. Things are going well. Some teams are playing really well. In the National League, Atlanta's just on a streak, winning like crazy. St. Louis is winning a lot of games. They're playing really well. Houston is looking solid, which the Yankees don't want to hear. Tampa's starting to play really well. I don't know if they'll catch up the 9 games to the Yankees or not, but they're starting to play really well. So a lot of teams are really hot right now.
That's excellent. That's what we need. Baseball needs that. It's kind of like all sports. If it gets blown, try that in English. If everybody gets blown away, there's no fun in that. The longer it stays a competitive race, the better it is for the sport.
Absolutely. I think so too. And I think, we talk about people getting turned off by baseball with all the new things and stuff. I think a pennant race makes things exciting for everybody. It gets people back into the concept of baseball and watching it because the pennant races are exciting.
Good point.
Just as much as the World Series is exciting. Watching them get to that point is exciting.
Well, do you remember back in the 90s when the Braves and the Dodgers had that one year where they went down to the very last game of the season?
Oh, yeah. That's happened with quite a few teams this recently. I mean, it's really exciting. It's sitting at the end of your chair, even at home. You get the white knuckles on your chairs, and you're just watching, hoping it's your team. And
good point.
It's amazing.
Well, see, I bring up the Braves just because of where we're broadcasting from, and folks here remember it more dearly to their heart. But you're right. Every time there's one of those pennant races going on, I watch more then.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, otherwise, who wants to see an MIA team play another MIA team?
I agree, and I'm very happy for the Braves. I mean, they're playing really well. They're in their new stadium. I know the fans are excited. I was able to coach a scout league team for them in the 90s, and they're a class organization. I'm really happy that they're playing well.
Yep. See, they deserve it after so many years of waiting.
Well, they also had so many years of back-to-back winning everything, too. I mean, not the World Series, but the National League playoffs.
That's right. Back to here we are. We're in the World Series, and we're going to choke.
Yeah. But, it's a new era, new players, new team, new coaches. And they're looking good. They're looking really good.
See all the Braves fans at home and going, I thought he was a homer for the other guys.
I'm not a homer for anybody.
That's true.
Not for anybody. But it's exciting to watch the teams play this well. This is when you want to start gelling and doing well, while at the same time resting some of your good guys, your better players, so that they're fresh and no lingering injuries, going into September, October.
This is when the manager starts saying, please, God, stay off the motorcycles.
Boy, that's for sure.
How many times have you seen a guy screw up his career or season by not necessarily a motorcycle, pick it just because it's easy, but going out doing something?
Well, motorcycles is probably one of the biggest ones, but yeah, they'll do it boating. They'll do it with stupid things, I mean, it's really a shame that for teams and for the players that something happens, that they can't avoid. Talk about something that they can't avoid. Big Papi the other night. Big Papi went into Fenway Park and threw out the first pitch, and the fans loved seeing him again.
I bet.
He was excited. You could just hear them all yelling, "Papi, Papi," and his smile and walking out, and he looked good.
See, for all you folks sitting at home going, does Joe really watch all this baseball? Yes, he does. He has 12 TVs going at all times. His lovely wife comes home and says, "Oh, dear God."
My wife is the best. She is the best. Love you, Crystal. Anyway, let's talk about the standings. We're talking about those hot Braves. They are dominating the National League East. They're in front solidly, followed by the Washington Nationals. The Philadelphia Phillies and the New York Mets are battling for fourth. And your MIA team, the Miami Marlins,
Go Marlins.
not only are holding up the rear, but also not even playing 500 baseball in their last 10 games.
They were kind of praying a hurricane came through so they would have an excuse not to play for a few months.
That could be. That could be. In the National League Central, the St. Louis Cardinals are in first. The Cubs are close behind, and Milwaukee Brewers are right behind them. So that could end up being, if we have enough time left, where that could be a 3-team race. That's pretty exciting because Milwaukee's playing very well. And Pittsburgh pulling up the rear in that division. And then the Dodgers are in front in the National League West. Not playing about 500 baseball in their last 10 games or so. Not doing as well as they were doing. Followed by Arizona, San Francisco Giants, the San Diego Padres, and holding up the rear, the Colorado Rockies.
It's that Rocky Mountain High thing.
That could be. Maybe they should stay away from some of those silver bullets and see what happens. There's a lot of things going on there in Colorado.
Hey, we've got one of our fans has a brother out there in Colorado, and he's actually an attorney. He tells
He does a good business out there.
Everybody's high all the time.
There you go. There you go. In the American League East, we have the New York Yankees in first place, playing good baseball, well ahead of Tampa Bay, who's playing really hot right now. Right behind them is the Boston Red Sox. And then behind them, far behind them, is the Toronto Blue Jays. And further back from them is the Baltimore Orioles, who are already playing for 2020. Those poor Baltimore fans, they are so loyal and don't get anything to show for it.
You know, they got a name for the winners of the world, and those poor folks in Baltimore don't know what that is because it's not Oriole.
It's a struggle for them. In the American League Central, we have Minnesota in front, followed by the Cleveland Indians, a few games back. Far behind them is the Chicago White Sox. Further behind them is the Kansas City Royals. And way further than them is the Detroit Tigers, another team that should be doing a lot better than they are.
And to our listener from Daphne, who is a huge Tigers, Lions fan, sorry, man.
And to Denny McClain, one of the contributors to our show, we're sorry, Denny. Maybe 2020 will be the year.
Or not.
We'll see. And in the American League West, like we said, Houston is in first and playing just great baseball right now, followed by the Oakland A's. Behind them is the Texas Rangers, the Los Angeles Angels, and pulling up the rear in that division is the Seattle Mariners, who some people in the beginning of the year were projecting to win it all.
So what happened to those poor guys?
You know, they're just a combination of everything you need. Certain times they had no pitching. Second time they had no hitting. Sometimes it runs together. They've just really been struggling all season long.
It was one of those things. There's some voodoo queen out there that just had the bad juju.
Yeah, because there too, they have a beautiful stadium. I've been lucky enough to be there. Their fans are very good fans, loyal to the team, and you know it's a struggle. You know, so then you have to go to questions like, is that the struggle, or do you want to see like Dodger fans, where 2 years in a row you're in the World Series and you choke? What's a bigger struggle? You know.
Very good point. Funny you bring up choke just after we talked about another team that was professional at it.
It's just amazing. And I don't know which one I would want. I mean, being in the World Series is nice, but at some point you got to come through.
Good point. And the Dodgers have such a history of winning the World Series. That's when you see them get that close and they struggle. How'd that happen?
Yeah,
I mean, this is one of the pinnacles of baseball.
because going into both of them, they were favored to win, and it didn't happen.
Yep.
And they're definitely not peaking right now as a team.
Yeah, and when it's our team, we're always like, well, it's going to happen when they hit the playoffs. Right now, guys are they know they've got it once, they're not trying real hard. It's like, yeah, you need to go back to trying real hard because otherwise you get into the habit, and the habit is bad.
Boy, that's very true. And baseball is more habit and muscle memory and those kind of things than most sports. I mean, it's really is habit and the mental part of it.
Yeah. If you say, well, I'm going to take this inning off, oh, yeah, that works out well.
Right.
And you see guys out in the outfield sometimes like, oh, look, airplane.
Yeah, or you'll see them picking grass, and I mean, it's very very interesting what they're doing nowadays.
Well, they're out there trying to teach the groundskeeper how to keep the clover down.
But fans, the fans are still there for the most part. For teams, this is the time where if your team's still in it, you'll see the fans. Otherwise, like you said last week, the fans are dressed as empty seats.
Yep.
And they're not coming out to support their team anymore.
Which is a crying shame because baseball has, to some degrees, made things a little more affordable for some of them.
They have for some. They see the need to have less expensive seats for people and things like that. But, as the salaries keep going up and up, it's turning a lot of people off no matter what anyway,
Good point. It's hard for the guy who's, even if you're making $30,000 or $40,000 or $50,000 a year, it's hard for that guy to feel sorry for somebody else who's making $30 million a year, and you're like, oh.
$30 million and holding out because he wants more.
Yeah, and you're like, sure, I feel sorry for Pedro. He needs that extra
Right.
$10 million.
Right.
Well,
It's hard.
and the guy making $50,000 is going, but I can't quite afford to go to the game because I got to buy 2 seats at however much. Then I've got to buy Coca-Colas or whatever drinks.
You have to buy food that's always 3 times more expensive than anywhere else.
Yes. And then
Parking, which minimum is $10. Some places $25.
so you finish the game and you're a couple $100 lighter, and you're like, what did I accomplish?
Yeah. Especially if your team isn't playing well. People don't have $300 to spend for nothing.
Especially teams playing at a 3 o'clock in the afternoon game. They're like, it's 97 degrees out there. You're insane if you think I'm going to go show up.
Yeah. And I don't know. It's very frustrating.
Good point. And I'm sure some of the players notice it. Not all of them. Some of them are oblivious. But, players always play better for a crowd.
Oh, they do. That's a definite. It psychs them up. That's a definite. And obviously they play better in warmer weather, not humidity, but in warmer weather. The fact that with all of these new playoff games and things that baseball has put in, they're almost pushing baseball back to November, and you see them playing in some of these cold cities, and everybody's bundled up. The game may be called for snow. You have to hit a ball with your bat, and just when it's cold, you just get that stinging in your hands. Baseball isn't meant to be played in the cold.
No, but again, that's when you say, okay, I get it. We want to keep the entertainment value because that means more money to the TV networks and to the ownership. So we want to drag that out as long as we can. That's nice. But if you're realistically, if you're turning it into a misery application, what's the point?
Right. Very true. It's just so hard for players to be able, it causes more injuries. You're not really playing to the best of your ability because sometimes you can't move. Sometimes you're afraid to move. Baseball has to do something to keep the game back into just the beginning of October, not much further than that.
Well, let's think about something you can relate to well. If you're a player that's been injured or had an injury in the past, say knees or elbow, something like that. When it gets cold, your knees lock up.
Oh yeah, that's definite.
Yeah.
That's definite. And a lot of pitchers, you don't want a pitcher to go out there and get warm throwing and then have to sit in. And do you want your team to bat around and score all those runs? You do, but you don't want your pitcher to get cold. Because he has to go back out then, and it's almost warming up again. And I mean, it's really a dangerous thing, I think.
Yep, and then when you mess somebody's arm up, they don't bounce back from that one.
No, they don't. I mean, that's a tough thing to do.
You hear the pitchers; they won't really complain a lot, but you still hear the rumblings of, the guy's out there hurting himself.
Yeah, I mean, they'll get there and say, "We're playing in this."
Yeah, no doubt. Should I bring a parka out to the mound?
Right. I mean, most of them are saying, "Come on, Houston," because they don't want to have to play in New York in the winter.
Not that I blame them.
I mean, there's a lot of teams a lot of players hope they play somebody from the West Coast, so it's not as cold.
Good point. Yeah, the Dodgers players are like, can we play like the Anaheim Angels?
The Dodgers are hoping there's a freeway series so they could play the Angels.
No kidding. It's like, it may not be great for TV, but it sure is great for the players.
Yeah, and I think for TV, by far the best lineup is the Dodgers against the Yankees. I think that's so many memories, so many games series between them that, to a lot of people, that's the World Series. That's baseball, is Dodgers versus Yankees.
See, that's one of those things, and I understand why when they built the new stadium, they didn't want a roof on it. But it's still one of those things. Yeah, I get it, history and whatnot. But you're playing winter sports there. Baseball's a summer sport, but you're playing it in the middle of the winter.
Yeah.
Why not put a roof on that silly thing where your players and your fans can go and enjoy them?
I agree. I don't know what they're thinking, or they're not thinking. Well, I do know what they're thinking. The more playoff games, the more money. Let's have this playoff followed by this playoff, followed by this playoff, followed by the World Series. At some point they just have to stop thinking about making the dollar and keep the players safe, keep the fans warm.
Well, see, some of the hardcore folks tell you, remember when it was just basically two teams? That was the playoffs,
Yeah.
the World Series, and that was it. Then it became, let's have this championship series, then let's have this precursor to the championship series. Next thing you know, we just invite everybody. Come on out, guys. Season was just a warm-up.
Almost. I mean, I remember, it hasn't been that long in baseball history where the Central Division has even been around. It was East versus West. And then, more teams and more money. Let's do East and Central and West. And that way we can have more playoffs, make more money, earn more money. I mean, at some point it's just got to stop.
Which is why, to some degree, the fans are not showing up, though, because it's like, yeah, we get it. It's all about the money. But, you have those fans who are like me. I love the sport. I love watching various sports. But I very rarely go to the stadium anymore because it's not worth it. They've taken a lot of the fun out of the game.
They really have. They really have. And even back in the 60s and 70s, you sometimes, as a fan, would have access to the players, either be it batting practice before the game or after the game, some players would come out. You don't have that access anymore. I mean, I don't think the teams allow it because there's too much money invested in the players. They want them back inside, and so you don't get to see your player or talk to your guy or get a baseball other than a foul ball, or if you're lucky enough to be at batting practice and get one.
Or if you happen to be lucky enough to get hit in the head, like happened to a few fans, and the ball, they catch the ball from that or a bat, and the player says, "Hey, if you come back, we'll give you whatever." That's nice, but the real answer is the bulk of the folks, like you said, they don't get any connection with the players, so why should I care? And for me, I can remember not that many years ago standing outside the dressing room as the players would come out, and heck, they'd stop, sign autographs.
Right.
That was awesome. Even if you're only going to do it for kids, that's still awesome.
Yeah.
Because that's our next wave of players.
Yeah, you want them to be baseball fans.
Good point. So sometimes it's kind of nice. We need to find a way to get that back. We need to stop worrying about the nickels and the dimes and start worrying about the Joeys and the Benjis.
And I think that's true because, you know, the players, the teams, they're making enough money where they don't have to think about making more. You know, let's gear the game back to the fans.
Good point.
You know, player access and warm weather, and do what you can do to appreciate the people who are buying the tickets and the hot dogs and the souvenirs and the parking.
Good point.
You know, let's make everybody happy.
Oh, but the most important thing you bring to our game is your dollars.
And unfortunately, that's what they think.
Yes, especially they love you if you're a network, and if you're giving them a game of the week on your network,
Oh, then you've got it made.
yeah, they will kiss your.
You don't care what place you're in. You're making your money,
Very good point.
you know, and that's not right.
I agree.
And some of the better teams are putting more money into the teams, you know, where some other teams aren't. The money's going to ownership and things like that, and that's just not right. But let's get back to who our guest is tonight.
Okay.
We have a man who has pitched longer for the Los Angeles Dodgers than anybody in history. And I know people who have been guessing who is that going to be. You will never guess.
I'm not going to guess.
They will never guess. We're going to get him on the phone in a minute. His name is Mike McDermott.
Who?
People get to call him Mac, and he is one of the most hardworking people. He was a batting practice pitcher for the Dodgers for 30 years.
Good grief.
30 years of throwing strikes, about 150 pitches per game. Before the game, throwing strikes to, well, we'll let him tell you about his career. Let's get Mac on the phone.
You got it. And while we're doing that, it's kind of funny. 30 years, 150 pitches a game. Good grief. This guy was a machine.
He was a pitching machine.
No kidding.
And
All
a
right,
great guy. And on the phone with us is a man who has pitched more than any other player for the Los Angeles Dodgers. His name, Mike McDermott. Mac, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Joe. Thank you very much.
Good deal. Good deal. I know a lot of Dodger fans who get there early and stuff will have recognized you. Hopefully they all know your name, but by the end of today, everyone's going to know who you are and how much you contributed to the success of the Dodgers for 30 years. That's an amazing
Yeah, you know,
feat.
it was a great run. You know, got a pitch to, like a lot of people think, like the heyday of the Dodgers when we had Garvey and Say and Lopes and Russell and Baker, and it was a great time to be pitching there, and went through a lot of good. We had some championship teams during that period, and it was a great run for me.
I'll bet, and for the team. I mean, that's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
How were you able to start that in the first place? That work your way into that position?
Well, what happened was I grew up in Alhambra, California, and many of my high school buddies happened to work at Dodger Stadium. They were bat boys or ball boys, and one day one of them approached me like in 1964, 65, and said, "Hey, we need a guy to come and unpack uniforms at night when the teams come in from the road." So I said, "Hey, I'm there." So went down there and started unpacking uniforms and just helping out in the visiting clubhouse. And eventually one of the guys quit, and the clubhouse manager, name was Jim Mewey, asked me to stay on and be the bat boy. And I became the bat boy for all the visiting teams that came into town. So, and that was also a great time because we had, you know, Hank Aaron, Willie Mays, Roberto Clemente, and I got to wear all the uniforms for all the visiting teams.
Right.
So, you know, it was a kick. St. Louis Cardinals, Pittsburgh, I got to wear all those. And so I did that for a couple years, and then I heard they needed a BP pitchers. And my strong suit in pitching, which I pitched in high school and in college, was control. So Carol Behringer, who was a coach for the Dodgers at the time,
Right.
took me down to the right field bullpen, and Walter Alston was the manager, and he liked how I threw that day. He called Walter Alston over. They hired me in 1969-70, and they hired me that day, and I did it for 30 years.
That's just amazing.
Yeah,
That's a
very-
phenomenal
very
thing.
fortunate.
So, well, you were sitting in the other team's dugout, in the visitors' dugouts. Who were some of your favorite players?
Well, some of the guys, hopefully your listeners will remember, but Bob Veal, who was a big left-handed pitcher with Pittsburgh Pirates, we became buddies. Roberto Clemente was one of the most generous guys. He used to give all of us bat boys $5 when he would leave.
Wow.
And back then,
Yeah.
I mean, any money from any of those players was a big deal to us. But
Exactly.
he would always hand us a $5 bill when he left. And it's funny, it's 40, 50 years ago. And I remember it was like it was yesterday. A little act of kindness goes a long way, you know.
Boy, that's
and,
for sure.
And he was such a kind guy. And, of course, Willie Mays and Willie McCovey with the Giants and, Stan Musial. I mean, I was fortunate enough to see all those guys and intermingle with those guys. And it was a blast. It was great.
That's really fun. How'd it feel being a Dodger fan your whole life to all of a sudden be in the dugout with Mays and McCovey and, quote unquote, the enemy?
Well, Joe, it was funny because when I was younger, I used to sit up on the top deck, and I would sneak down, and I'd go to like double headers when they had double headers, and I would get there when they opened the gates, and I would leave when they kicked me out. So like a buddy and I, we go down to the field level and try to sneak over and just bend over and touch the dirt, grab a little handful of Dodger Stadium dirt, and so when I started working for the Dodgers, became a bat boy, I mean, I'm thinking I used to watch these guys from the top deck and just dream about just touching the field. Now I'm intermingling with some of the greatest players that ever played the game. And most all of them, treated us great. And you sit on the bench. And as a bat boy, I'd be kneeling on the on-deck circle,
Right.
holding an extra bat in case they broke the bat or something. I'd be leaning up against that, and I'd have the pine tar and the rosin, and they'd call timeout or something. I'd take it up to them, and I just would kind of shake my head and I say, "Isn't it? I'm running up taking a bat to Willie Mays or Hank Aaron or Roberto." It was just unreal.
That had to just really be incredibly exciting.
Incredibly, especially I just love baseball. I mean, I would get out of my elementary school and run home and just to throw the ball up against the brick wall to pretend I was Maury Wills or pretend I was a Dodger playing against the Giants, and I would just do it alone and throw it up against the wall, and I could do that for hours because I just love baseball so much.
Isn't that fun? That's just great. And then you actually got to work with them, be in a dugout with the other team, and then make it to your favorite team.
Right. Well, Carol Behringer, like I said, was a coach, and Walter Alston, who was a wonderful guy, just top notch. They hired me, and so I started. The first few days, I remember pitching. We had a couple other BP pitchers there, but eventually I worked my way into throwing to the starting lineup, and my job was to pitch to the starting outfielders and the starting catcher. And Mark Cressy, who I'm sure you know, was a bullpen coach. He would throw to the infielders. So he and I would split the groups, and like I said, I would throw to the outfielders, and I would have Baker and Reggie Smith and Kenny Landreau and either Yeager or Socha or Ferguson. Those would be my guys.
Man. Yeah, we had Mark on the show about a month or so ago, and we talked a lot about well, I talked a lot about him and just how, in my opinion, he was the hardest working coach ever in Major League Baseball.
Joe, without question. I mean, that guy, and I used to joke with him. I said, "You ever go home and just flop on the couch and turn TV on or anything?" And I mean, he's perpetual motion. He never stopped. And he ran batting practice, and he'd have to get all the baseballs ready hours and hours. He'd be the first guy there and prepare all that, get all that set up. Then he would throw BP, he would catch BP, and then he would hit ground balls to the infielders. I mean, he was just the hardest, by far, working coach I ever came across.
I agree
and a
with
great
that.
guy.
And a great guy, absolutely. Great guy, great family. So,
Yeah,
do you
yeah.
remember when your very first time going in to pitch, BP?
You know, I was nervous, but you know, once you throw the first couple pitches and you throw them over the plate, it kind of all goes away. You just fall into line there. I can't remember the first. I actually do remember the first hitter I ever pitched to, and I've seen him recently. It was Ron Fairley,
Wow.
the old
Number
USC
6.
guy, and number 6 left-handed hitter. He was the first guy I ever pitched to, and we were joking about that at Fred Clare has a golf tournament, and he was there, and we were discussing that. So it was a pretty big thrill for me to have pitched to Ron Fairley as actually my first guy that I remember throwing to, and he was a great hitter.
He was.
And he had a long career in the major leagues. But I do remember that, and he was left-handed, and for some reason, left-hand hitters seemed to be a little bit easier to pitch to for me. You know, your Buckners and your Landros and Fairleys and the lefties were always a little bit easier, but he was the first, and it was. I never looked back after that. You know?
How fun. Did any of the thousands of people that you pitched to, and of all those pitches, were there ever anybody who said to you, you know, I want it chest high inside, chest high outside? Was anybody that specific?
Sure. 99% of the time you throw fastballs. You know, you're not trying to strike them out. You're not trying to fool them. You know, this is all about them, not about you. And you're throwing. They just want strikes. They want to get loose. They want to work on things. Then generally what happens, Joe, is like the first round of BP they bunt. Then the second round they'll try to go the opposite way. A right-hander will go to the right side, and the left-hander will go to the left side of the infield or outfield, and they're just, you know, like a hit-and-run situation. Then the third round they'll do whatever they want, and they drive the ball or you know, hit the ball with power or whatever. But and usually the third round they'll ask me, like Mike Socia was a perfect example. He always wanted alternating fastball, curveball, fastball, curveball. So you had to have something that would spin up there and have some movement that you could also throw over the plate. So they'd see the different speeds and different angles and all that. But 90% of the time you throw fastballs, and you're not trying to fool them, and you're just trying to. The harder they hit it, the better off you are, and they are.
Right. Right. And the fans are, because they're all there waiting for those balls.
Absolutely. That's another thing that used to scare the heck out of me. You know, a lot of fans would come in early, and they'd be hanging out down the lines or in the pavilion, and sometimes they don't pay a lot of attention. They're talking, and these guys just hit rockets, you know. And so, you know, they pull the ball down the line, and you always hear a player yelling, you know, heads up or look out or something, and then fans would put their hand over their head and go right past them, you know. So that was during BP, and you'd kind of cringe because you think, hey, you're coming early for BP, you got to be paying attention because you could hurt somebody. So luckily, I never really saw anybody get hit that way, but you know, it gets a little dangerous if you're not paying attention.
That's for sure. That's for sure. I'm really amazed. I know they've just put you know, screens up around the fences at a lot of places now, and they're all going to be doing it. But in all the years that I've been and watched games and played games. I've never saw anybody get hit, and it really is amazing because that ball just flies back there.
Yeah, and people bring gloves, and they'll put the glove up and block the view of the person behind them, and you think, man, they're going to catch one, in the forehead or something. But like you said, it's pretty rare you see somebody really get hurt. But in BP, we'd be yelling at people all the time, hey, heads up if you're going to be there early.
Right. Yeah, it really is amazing that nothing happens to people. So can you, when you would be around the players, are there some funny things that you ever saw happen, or better memories?
The funniest thing I could relate to is Steve Yeager, who was one of our catchers, and he was kind of a character, And
very much so.
Walter Alston was the manager then, and Walter Alston would lean up against the batting cage with the other coaches, resting their arms on the cage, watching BP. And Yeager, they knew, could get a little riled up at times. So I'm pitching to Yeager, and I'm throwing fastballs, like I said, 90% of the time. And so Alston gives me the curveball sign, like throw him a curveball. And I'm looking at Alston. I said, are you out of your mind? I'm not going to do that. So I throw a couple more fastballs, and then Alston said, hey, he'd give me the curveball twist with his wrist, and I'm thinking, oh, boy. So sure enough, I threw the curveball, and Yeager's 10 feet out in front of it and starts chasing me around the in with his bat. And he's like he's going to kill me, because, he was way in front of me. You can hurt a guy like that. But Alston's telling me to do it, so I do it. And here's Yeager chasing me around the infield with a bat. And Alston and I think Danny Ozark, whoever was the coaches then, were all laying on the ground just laughing and laughing. And here I'm running for my life. But that was Yeager, and they knew that would be his reaction. Other players I could have done it to, they wouldn't have said anything or done anything. But Steve was, and I knew it was going to happen, but I didn't think he chased me. But he didn't catch me. But I'll tell you one thing about him. He and I would go at each other. Yeager and I, he'd ask me, how you throwing the ball? And if I didn't throw it right where he wanted to. But we'd go at each other a little bit. But as we're walking up the field, Yeager'd run up to me, put his arm around me, and says, hey, Mac, if I didn't love you, I wouldn't mess with you, okay? And that was how that ended.
That's fun. That's really funny.
Yeah.
That's really funny.
Yeah.
And I remember a time at Dodger Stadium, a non-baseball game, when the Pope came there and you were there.
Yeah, and they they had this big white chair, obviously, for the Pope, and they had it in the pavilion underneath the stand. So after the Pope service, after he was finished, I went into the pavilion, and there was his chair. Pope sat in. So I guess it was okay. I went over and sat in the Pope's chair, and it was kind of a thrill,
Oh, heck yeah.
Sit in the same chair where the Pope sat. But I thought about it, and I said, should I do that? I did it. And it was kind of, I don't know if anything rubbed off on me, but it was kind of fun.
I'm sure you hoped it did. I don't know. To make it 30 years, I think something rubbed off.
Yeah. I'm just very fortunate the Dodgers, the O'Malley family was the whole key to it.
That's for sure.
Treated us so well, and it was like a family. And Peter O'Malley would, when you see him walk in the stadium, he'd see you and he always call you by name. And same with his sister, Terry Seidler.
Terry, yeah.
Same way. And I see them quite often to this day, and they're just a great family, and they were great to all of us with the Dodgers.
And they were great owners. I know they did a lot for the city, and everybody loved them. Just great and people.
I see Terry. We go to the same church together, and I see her almost every Sunday, and she's a wonderful person as Peter.
Yeah, he really is. He really was friendly. He'd walk around. One time he and I were standing together when Gagne was on his streak of just being dominant and just watching him.
Right.
We watched him close an inning and just shook our heads at just how incredible he was.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a good guy.
Peter treated all his employees well, and I was fortunate. I got 4 championship rings, and it all starts with the O'Malley family, and there's no bigger thrill than in December to get a letter in the mail saying, congratulations, you will be receiving a championship ring with the sizer inside the envelope. And I mean, that's, the biggest thrill of them all. That's what they all play for, is one of those rings. And I am fortunate enough to have 4 of them.
That's amazing. That really is amazing. And you
Yeah,
well deserved. Well deserved. Congratulations on that. Why don't you let people know how hard you worked? Tell us a little bit about how early you got there and what you did to prepare.
Well, early on, you would get there around 4:00. BP starts around 4:30, but I wouldn't pitch until usually 5:30, and the starters would hit from 5:30 to 6. So I'd get there about 4, suit up, get loose. Then we'd shag in the outfield and stuff for the other BP, and then I would pitch at 5:30, like I said, to my group, and Mark Cressy would pitch at 5:45. We'd each pitch 15 minutes, and my friends would say, 15 minutes, that's all you? I said, believe me, you have rapid fire BP. You throw about 150 pitches a day in BP, and like you have a ball in your glove and a ball in your hand, and those guys, they want their swings, they want to hit. So you're not taking a lot of time in between. They want a pitch, every few seconds. So you're throwing a lot of balls in those 15 minutes.
Yeah,
and,
a lot more than they do today in 9 innings.
Absolutely. And another thing, Joe, I pitched from the rubber,
Right.
nearly the rubber,
Right.
maybe a foot in front. Now you look at them. Hey, I could be doing it today. I may throw from 10 feet away. I watched that. It cracks me up. I say, really? They're way up there on the grass, But
I don't know how that
pitched
helps with
from
their
just
timing.
in front of the rubber.
I don't see how the way they do it, like you're saying now, that helps with their timing. I don't get it.
Yeah, to me, it's just too close, and we even have a cage under the stands at Dodger Stadium, batting cage, and we would throw from the rubber there, and it seemed like it's much better for the hitter's timing and everything,
Yeah, that's I don't know. But what you did, I mean, it really was just amazing work, and the constant strikes. I mean, you see how you made it so long, and just your rapport with everybody. I remember the fans who were out there early to watch batting practice, the rapport with them. You would always wave, you would always say hi to people, and everybody appreciated it. I know that. That was very nice of you. You fit in well with the family side of baseball, the Dodger family side of baseball.
Yeah, Joe, I always looked at it from, hey, I always say treat people like you want to be treated. And when I was a kid, sitting on that top deck, and just trying to work my way down just to touch the dirt, and when I'm out in the outfield and I see a little kid with his hat and glove and wide-eyed and all that, if I can get him a ball, I'm getting him a ball. And I have had people, when I go to the games now, I usually go to on the club level up there, and I've had people come up to me and ask me, you used to throw batting practice here? And I said, yeah. And he goes, in 1982, I had my little son with me, and you came over and gave him a ball. And, he still has that ball on his dresser at home. Now he's 40-something, And at the time, I didn't think much of it. But when you hear stories like that, it makes you feel so good, because it was a big deal to that little kid,
Sure.
as it would have been to me.
Sure. And you
to
did
have
it a
someone
lot.
acknowledge that 30 or 40 years later, makes you feel like, hey, you did something nice for somebody, and they're acknowledging it. And I've had that happen several times. So
I'll bet, and
yeah,
there's a lot more than you know, and and that's the reason I'm sure that a lot of them are still baseball fans, was because you were open like that. Because if you weren't, they would have went, "Oh,
Sure.
baseball's no good," you know. But they lucky enough to have you there, and they still love the game because of that. Even more so because they got a souvenir.
Yeah, well, I'm sure you've heard stories of people complaining, "Hey, I went up to this player and he wouldn't sign he kind of blew me off and wouldn't sign for me, or
Right.
my son, he just walked by us." And we've all heard those stories, and you kind of cringe. Those guys have to realize you see the same people on the way down as you saw on the way up. So,
Very
it
true.
doesn't hurt. A little kindness doesn't hurt you, and a few seconds, and you can make a little kid's day and life. Actually, I could put like with me, first time I met like Sandy Koufax, when I used to stand out there and wait till they came out of the clubhouse. I mean, I can remember that like it was yesterday, and he signed a ball for me, and it was like, the biggest day of my life back then.
Sure.
So I remember that, and players should remember to do that too.
Yeah, and there were so many good ones back then, which was really nice.
Yeah.
Who were some of the guys who you really enjoyed being around?
So many. To this day, Mickey Hatcher and Mike Sosha, I see them quite often and speak with them quite a bit. Just good guys. Mickey has a Christmas party every year at his house, and Ron Renicky and of course Mike and all of them show up. Bill Russell was always one of my favorites. I talk to Dusty Baker 2 or 3 times a year. He's up in Sacramento area now, and he was always one of my favorites. And he always treated everybody so well. And if you remember a player, Richie Allen,
Oh yeah.
Dick Allen,
Yeah.
with the Philly.
Great hitter. He was with the
yeah,
Dodgers for a while.
Yeah, he came to the Dodgers just for 1 year,
Yeah.
and we hit it off. And he's still associated with the Phillies as a consultant, but he's getting up there in age and everything. But his brother was a trainer at Santa Anita, and horse trainer. So Richie and I would go over here and stop at a restaurant, pick up a pie, go over to Marie Callender's, go over to Santa Anita. We'd sit in the stables and eat pie and just talk baseball and horse racing and all that. He was the type of guy that used to hang out with just us regular guys, and he was just he's always one of my favorites. And Richie Allen's borderline Hall of Famer, and
Definitely should
maybe
be.
maybe someday he'll get in there. But so he's always was one of my favorites. Garvey's always been great. Same guy as when I met him in the early 70s, and I see him at the ballpark now. Same guy, always says hello to you, your family. Always gracious, always takes his time. So those are some of the guys that I still stay in contact with. I see Ron Say at the stadium. All real good guys.
They are. They really are. And it's good to hear that you say that about Dick Allen, because I know he has such a bad reputation, and I never understood it because he was always just friendly and good whenever I saw him. So I'm glad you talked
The players
about him.
loved him. Yeah. The players loved him. He didn't want to take batting practice every day, and they wanted him out there, and he would but if you talk to any of the managers, they all love the guy, because when he got between the lines, he was tough as nails, and his teammates, he was a great teammate, and they all loved him. But he kind of beat to his own drum. But and like I said, he treated the little guy really well, and he used to write me when he left. He went to the White Sox from the Dodgers, and he would be, when he'd be on the planes, he would write me letters and tell me what's going on and how he felt about different teams and different organizations, and just a great guy, and I
Wow,
really
that's
enjoyed
great.
him.
That is great. Good for
Yeah.
him. Good to hear that about him. I know people
Yeah.
have other impressions, so maybe this will open up a lot of people's eyes. That's good to hear.
Yeah, he went through a lot of stuff when he was coming up with the racially and everything, and he told me that he called his mother and told him he was going to quit. And this is early on when he was in the minors and he was catching so much grief and all that. And his mother said, "No, you're not. You have this God-given talent. You're going to stick it out." And so he stayed, and he did. And look what he became,
Boy,
And
that's
it was
for
tough
sure.
for him.
Yeah, he battled through it.
Yeah, yeah.
So when your turn pitching ended, did you have anything to do with like putting things away, sticking around, or were you just able? I know a lot of times you were up there watching the game.
Right. Well, what would happen is after I'd finish pitching, I'd usually go in and change into another top or something because you've got a good workout. Then I go shag in the outfield to finish up BP when Mark was pitching. And a lot of times they'd ask me to play first base when Amalfitano or whatever coach was hitting ground balls to the infielders. And back then we had Adrian Beltre playing third, and you had Juan Castro and Bill Russell and those guys. And so I'd be playing first, but I'd always warn the visiting team dugout. I'd turn around, I'd yell over at them, and I'd point to myself, and I'd say, "Hey, I'm playing first, so move down, scatter, get down the other end," because my vertical leap wasn't maybe a foot. So if the guys, 90% of the time, the infielders would throw perfect strikes over to me. But if they're off a little bit, I wanted to make sure those guys sitting in the first base dugout were aware it was me playing first, so it wouldn't smack anybody. So I would always let them know.
That'll
So,
help make friends with
I
the
would do
visiting
that.
teams.
Yeah, I would play first. Sometimes I'd play second because those guys would just want to throw to a base. And when I was done with that, I was pretty much done. Go shower up, and I'd go out. And back then we had the dugout seats, and I'd go stand behind home plate, behind Mike Brito
Yeah,
with his speed gun.
breathe in his
and-
cigar.
Yeah, yeah. And then I'd watch a few innings, and that would be it.
Good
was
deal.
great.
Good deal.
Yeah, you couldn't beat it.
No, that's exciting. The longevity more than anything. 30 years being able to do that, to throw strikes, that really is amazing. And I know, as much as you know that it is amazing, you don't get, I don't think, how everybody wishes they could do that. I mean, it's really something that very few people could ever do, and that is an amazing feat on your part.
Well, thank God that my arm pretty much was trouble free. And to your point, while I was there in those 30 years, we probably had maybe 10 or 15 guys come out to try to throw BP because we had a turnover with a few guys because we'd have someone who would throw the earlier groups, and we just needed a couple other guys. And some guys threw harder, some guys threw. But the key to it is strikes, first of all. If you didn't throw strikes, you don't pitch. You didn't throw BP. These guys don't want to stand up there and take one ball, two ball, three. They don't want to, and they'll give you a look too. Some of them, if you don't throw strikes, they'll kind of
Boy,
glare
that's
at you
for
like,
sure.
hey, So if you don't throw strikes, you don't pitch. Some guys threw hard, but the guys don't want 90-mile-an-hour batting practice.
Right.
Because first of all, if you hit somebody, you're going to really hurt them. So the key is throwing strikes and being consistent. You have to throw every day. We'd have days where we'd have 10-game homestands, and they don't care. You throw 5 or 6 days in a row, if your arm's hanging a little bit, players don't care. They want to hit, and they don't want to hear it, so you just got through it. And there's some days after the second or third day your arm's kind of hanging, and then by the 10th day it kind of comes back, and you're throwing real well. But you'd have long homestands, and um, luckily Bill Bueller was our trainer, and he would let me go in and I'd ice my arm or my elbow, just drop it into a bucket of ice in the trainer's room, which would prevent any swelling or any irritation. But luckily, thank God, I never really had any major arm problems.
That is a good thing. And and that I don't know why, but that reminded me in your earlier days you would travel with the team. You'd go on the road too.
Yep, that was fantastic. I traveled for about 4 or 5 years and got a pitch in every National League stadium, and I was able to go to Canada and pitch in Montreal, which was Parc Jetty, or Jetty Park they called it, and I was able to pitch there. And I remember the first time I was there was early in the year, and I was still ice in the outfield, and I remember running in the outfield grass, and I would hear crunch, crunch, crunch because it was still covered with a little bit of ice, and we had those big jet heaters in the dugout that would be blasting, and it was a small ballpark. I think it was only one level, if I remember right, but it was called Jetty Park, and but then I got a pitch in Yankee Stadium, which was in the World Series, which I'd say was probably my biggest thrill.
Oh, bet.
Of all the years.
And that was when Yankee Stadium was still the real Yankee Stadium.
Right. And I pitched there in 77, 78, and unfortunately we lost the World Series, but it was a great thrill, and I remember George Steinbrenner coming, and they gave us all these World Series pins with a New York logo on them, which I still have. And a quick story, the uniform I wore was the gray one, obviously, and I had the top in my drawer at home for 25 years, and I kept thinking I should do something with this. So I took the top that I wore in Yankee Stadium in the World Series, and I had it framed. Luckily, a Dodger photographer took a picture of me pitching in the first game of the World Series, so I put that in a frame, put it in with a picture. I got a ticket from that actual game, an actual ticket, not a reproduction or anything, an actual ticket. And then I put the pin that Steinbrenner gave all the players for the World Series. So I have that in a big frame.
Wow.
A wall. Yeah.
Wow, so, that's something.
Yeah, I mean, biggest thrill, I think, was pitching in Yankee Stadium.
I'll bet. And Dodgers Yankees are, that was baseball. That was the World Series, and hoping it's that way again this year.
Yeah, it could be, and the Yankees handled us pretty good this last go around.
They sure did.
But we'll just have to see, Houston's going to have something to say about it, I think.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. There's no doubt about that. Yeah, it's going to be a good race, but I think there's the baseball traditionalists are hoping that it's Dodger Yankees again. Oh,
yeah. And, another thing, when I was pitching in Yankee Stadium, I'm standing on the mound there, and I remember walking out to the mound, and I did a 360, and I said, boy, isn't this something, And I said, Babe Ruth stood here. I said, Lou Gehrig, Mickey Mantle, Roger Maris, Whitey Ford. I stood right where I'm standing, and when I was pitching, I'm thinking Babe Ruth pitched off this same mound at one time.
Right.
And, and Al Downing, who's a good friend of yours,
right,
pitched off that mound, Gentleman Al, and all those Whitey Ford. I mean, it was just surreal to me, and it still is. I still get goosebumps when I think about it.
I'll bet.
That, so it was great.
That had to be real exciting. And the uniform in there, that has to be a great thing to just look up and see every once in a while. Yeah,
and like I said, having the ticket from that game and the pin Steinbrenner, I don't know how I ended up saving it because it's kind of a small little pin, but luckily I did, and so I have it all encased in one case, and I'm very proud of it,
And well deserved. I got a question for you. You were speaking about characters earlier, and as most people know, Jay Johnstone was probably the king of characters. Did he ever get you?
Did he what?
Did he ever get you with anything?
Oh yeah, he never really got me. I mean, we always he would do so many funny things. I mean, I remember the time when he stuffed something or a pillow or something in his uniform top and was mimicking Lasorda. He's going out to the mound and walking like Tommy did, and Tommy didn't take it too. They think it was too funny, but Jay would do stuff like that, and yeah, he's quite a character, and he lives fairly close to where I am, and see him once in a while. He's over here in Southern California, but yeah, Jay was a very popular, funny guy. You know?
He was great. He was great.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah.
After your memory being at Yankee Stadium, what's your second biggest memory in your or just your favorite thing ever that you experienced?
I think, you know, being able to travel and going to all the different stadiums. You know, I pitched in Shea Stadium. I pitched in Philly. I think probably one of my favorite memories was when we were in Philly and we had to beat the Phillies, in which we did. I think Tommy John actually pitched that winning game. And we all went back to, and I have a great picture of Dusty and I celebrating in Philadelphia in the clubhouse. And then we went back to Philly. We were staying at the Hilton, I believe, almost across from the stadium. And so we had to wait to see if the Yankees were going to either play the Yankees or Kansas City. And I remember sitting in the lobby, we were all watching the game, and I'm pulling for the Yankees big time because I wanted to pitch in Yankee Stadium and play the Yankees. And sure enough, the Yankees won, and we had a celebration in the lobby there, and that was in Philly, and you know, that was a precursor to the World Series, and that was a real big thrill for me. You know, and then another one, Joe, was we had old timers games at Dodger Stadium, and back in the day we had Koufax and Drysdale and Padres and Pee Wee Reese, and
Right.
they all would show up, and they would have stars from other teams
and the
come.
real
I remember
stars of
Bob-
the other team. Stan Musial would come, and you know,
Yeah.
Willie Mays. Yeah, that was great back then.
Well, one of the biggest thrills I had was Bob Feller came, and so Mark Cressy had me go over to one dugout, and he stayed in this one, and Feller and Koufax and Padres were all in my dugout. So who had to warm those guys up to just throw a few pitches before they went out on the mound was me. So I got to catch Koufax, Padres, Bob Feller, all in
Wow.
the same day. Yeah.
Wow.
So-
What a thrill.
And what I did was the ball I used to catch those guys, I kept it, and I have it here in a case at home that I caught those three guys. You know,
That's awesome. That is
that was
awesome.
a thrill. I mean, there's so many thrills, but that was, you know, two of the biggest ones.
That's really something. I want to thank you very much for taking your time and being with us and sharing your stories, letting people know who you are and how hard you worked and how much you contributed to the Dodgers' success.
Well, Joe, I really appreciate you having me on, and just so fortunate to be able to do it all those years, and I loved it. And it wasn't work; it was pleasure. But hey, it's baseball, and I loved it.
I understand, and though it was pleasure, you worked hard at it, and the fans loved you for it. Mac, thank you
thank you,
very,
Joe.
very much. I really appreciate
you,
it. You
Joe.
take
Really
care and have the
appreciate it.
rest of a great evening.
You too.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Ladies and gentlemen, I can't even imagine, just to be the guy, hey, will you warm these guys up? That's just fascinating.
That's one of those, you see most people, if you ask them that, they'd go, what?
Yeah.
You need to go? Really?
Yeah.
Because I mean, that's for most people not in their 40s and under. Those are the true highlights of baseball. You know, even when you compare them to a lot of the young guys now, those guys were the studs, all-time studs.
They were. They were. I mean, it's just amazing. Yeah, he was a hard worker. I mean, that just to go there and throw those strikes, and like he said, in that short of a span, you're throwing 150 pitches. That's just incredible. Absolutely incredible.
Well, sometimes it's kind of nice to have folks around who can bring back all those thoughts and all those memories. We need people need to appreciate what we have.
Well, and
what
we need
have.
people like him. You know,
Yes.
just a down to earth, great guy, cares about people, very, very humble. You know, if there's any such a thing as too humble, he's one of them because, I mean, him and Mark Cressy are the same kind of guy. Just worked hard. People don't realize how much they contributed, and they loved every minute of what they were doing. Two of the best people probably ever, and luckily we've been able to have them both on the show. Just two great caliber of people. So Mac, thank you again. We really appreciated it. Mark, if you're listening, thank you again for being on. Last week's trivia, we had a question. What shortstop holds the major league record for games played, assists, and double plays? We had a lot of answers, and nobody got it right. The answer to the trivia question is Ozzie Smith. Ozzie Smith.
The Wizard of Oz.
The Wizard of Oz.
And all the folks who are sitting in St. Louis right now going, how did I miss that?
Just amazing. Oh, man. Well, on that note, we want to thank you all for listening, for contributing to the show. We thank again to Mac for being on, and have a great rest of the evening.
Yes, thanks everybody. We enjoyed it and look forward to talking to you again next week.
Absolutely. Take care, everybody. Thank you very much.